Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Jessie, and welcome to my Tiny Talks podcast, the show where we'll dive into self-love, inner child healing, and discovering your soul's purpose. I look forward to chatting with you every single Sunday and helping you grow exponentially in all areas of your life. Without further ado, here's today's Tiny Talk. Hello, you guys, and welcome back to my Tiny Talks podcast. I am your host, Jessie Brown, and I am beyond excited to be chatting with you all today, where we are diving into week 42 of Tiny Talks. And today we are going to be chatting all about how your daily habits matter more than you might think that they do, and how our habits play such a vital role in our daily life and our actions and our trajectory of where we want our life to go. But sometimes we can get so stuck in the things that we've been doing for so long that we don't even realize how they're affecting us, how they might be holding us back, and how they might be negatively influencing us away from the areas of our life in which we want to go. And so my goal for this week's episode is for listeners to begin to notice your habits, to begin to notice the things that maybe you've been doing on autopilot for potentially your whole life, maybe years, maybe since the beginning of the pandemic. And bringing awareness to if your habits are bringing you closer to your goals or if they're just things that have caused you to become comfortable. Because routines are just that. They're things that have become set in stone that really push us to be in our comfort zone if we don't bring awareness to them often enough. And so without further ado, I am so excited to dive into week 42 with you guys, where we are going to be chatting all about your habits. So I thought it would be important to highlight first off what a habit is, because I think we all know on the surface what a habit is, but the actual definition is a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. And one thing that's important to note with a habit is that it all happens subconsciously, meaning routines that we have, brushing our teeth, taking a shower, getting our morning coffee, whatever those things are, they're things that are happening subconsciously that we don't even realize are happening. And so the reason that this episode surfaced for me was actually for lots of different reasons that kind of intersected. And so the reason that it started in the first place is because I'm reading Atomic Habits by James Clear. And this book is absolutely phenomenal. If you want a book that is going to change the way you think and just view your daily actions, that is the book I would recommend 100%. Not only does he go through the psychology of how habits work with our brain, but also how they're actually set to protect us. And so when we are able to bring awareness to those things, we're able to reset and rewire our brain, just like most things I talk about, to help benefit us. And so the second reason that I wanted to talk about this is because right now, as I've mentioned, I'm in a group coaching program. And in this group coaching program with Next Level University, basically, when we start off, we set out our goals. So we have one goal under health, one goal under wealth, and one goal under love. And then we have habits that we must do to pour into those goals that we want to have. Because if we have a goal, we have to work backwards of how we're going to accomplish that. And one of the biggest reasons that we don't accomplish our goals, or that we give up too early, or we stop trying, or we feel like we'll never get there, is because our habits aren't lining up with the things that we're wanting to do and the trajectory that we're trying to go on. And so when we're able to change our habits and the way that we show up every day and rewire that, we're beginning to reprogram our brain in a way that is serving us for where we are now. Because oftentimes when we have habits and things that we do them because they served us at one point in time or another. But if we've changed our goals, or we're leveling up, or we're doing something different, those habits might not be in alignment anymore and might be holding ourselves back, but we might just think it's something wrong with us of why we're not getting things done. When in reality, it's just because certain things have been wired in our brains for so long. And so in our group coaching program, we actually track our habits on an app where we can see our accountability. And the reason that I wanted to get around group coaching is because it's a lot easier to hold ourselves accountable when there's that group aspect that can also see how you're showing up. But it's also so important that we show up for ourselves because, as I always mention, that builds our self-love, that builds our self-confidence in all of those arenas. And so that was the second reason of how habits began to surface again, because I'm tracking my habits again. I have them very clearly defined and laid out in front of me. And since I started doing this, since my last time doing group coaching a year ago, it has absolutely transformed my life. Because the actions that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis are now serving me in my goals much more than the habits that I had formed from university or high school or any time before that. And so the last and final reason why I wanted to talk about this is because sometimes if I'm kind of stuck on what I want to share with you guys, or I'm just feeling a little bit of a block, I'll grab one of my Love Yourself cards. I have a stack of affirmation cards and I'll pull one out just repeating to myself, what does the world need right now? What do my listeners need to hear right now? What message do I need to remember or relearn right now? And I pulled this card this morning. I'm going to read it to you because it's so fitting. On one side it says, I release all feelings of negativity and guilt. But on the other side it says, we create habits and problems to fulfill a need. When I can find a positive way to fulfill the need, I can release the problem. And so with those three things kind of intersecting and coming together, I just felt beyond pulled to come on here and talk about habits because it's also something that I've been incorporating recently strongly again in my life. And I've seen the benefit of paying attention to our daily actions that we're doing. But the thing about habits that I think we don't realize is how much they control our day-to-day more than we realize that they are. And so I went ahead and I was kind of looking up some facts and pulling some facts from Atomic Habits and just some things that I thought would be beneficial to share with you guys, because I think that when we're able to bring awareness to these things and have kind of that concrete understanding, it makes us and allows us to believe that it is possible. Because sometimes we think that these things are possible for other people, but not for ourselves. And I used to think that way 100%, but I'm here to tell you that you have the capability. You have it in you to do the things that you have to do to rewire your brain. And I'm hoping my goal of today's episode is to just explain the psychology and how we form habits. And this is, again, things that I've pulled from Atomic Habits, things that I've pulled from Next Level University, information I've pulled from other folks that I want to pass on to you guys. And so the first kind of really cool thing that I want to note is that 40% of your daily actions are things that we do subconsciously. So almost half of our day are things that we do subconsciously, meaning that things that we do it's simply because our brain has been wired to do them over time. And so it's pretty interesting when we're able to just bring that to awareness of thinking like, 40% of my energy and my time and myself is things that I'm not even doing consciously. It really makes you wonder what those things are that you're doing. Because oftentimes we say, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do that, whatever it is. But when we hear that 40% of what we do every day is a habit, it really makes me curious of, is that 40% serving you in the highest way that it could be? Or is it just things that you've set in stone? And so going off of that, another cool fact is that it takes an average of 66 days for new habits to become wired in our brain, to become those unconscious things that we're doing. So it takes a little over 2 months of doing something consistently for it to become a new habit. And so if you're only doing something for a week or two, of course it's not going to become wired in you and to become a habit, because it's just not long enough to rewire the brain. And another really cool thing about habits that I think can help give us some permission that, again, our brain does everything to protect us and our body does everything to protect us and to serve us. Even though sometimes these things can become deeply rooted in certain situations. So I know during the pandemic, I had set really bad habits by staying up later, sleeping in more, eating worse, not going outside a lot, right? Those things that were just happening almost at a point because they had to, but then they became ingrained in me. And I think that a lot of us maybe took out quote unquote negative habits from the pandemic because we were stuck in them for almost 2 years. And so that makes sense. But so our brains create habits on purpose. Our brain doesn't do this by mistake or by default. It does it on purpose so that we're able to free up space for other things that are happening in our day-to-day life.
So for example, can you imagine if every morning when you woke up, you had to say to yourself, okay, now I have to get up and go to the bathroom. Now I have to brush my teeth. Now I have to go eat breakfast, right? It's those things that we do on autopilot subconsciously, so our brain doesn't have to think about it. It can free up that space. And so imagine if we allowed that space to be occupied with things and goals and wired in things that we're working towards. If our brain could just cue that, oh, it's time to go to the gym. Oh, it's time to go to sleep, because we've set that internal hard drive wiring for habits and things that we want to do. And the last fact that I wanted to share is that cravings are the brain's motivator. And I'm going to get more into that. But for something to become a habit for us, our brain has to crave it. And so we have to find those things that are in alignment of things that we want to be doing. And so it's really important that sometimes we, for example, going to the gym, we might not want to necessarily go to the gym, but it's the outcome of going to the gym that we're craving, and we're retelling our brain, we are healthy, we are athletic, we want to be the best version of ourselves, right? Changing the narrative of things. Because when we believe something and we strive for it and we crave it, our brain wants to do it that much more. So when we're able to shift our identity around things that we're doing to match our habits, our brain's going to latch onto that much quicker. So now I want to take you guys down a little bit of a journey of how habits are formed. Because to be able to change a negative habit, we have to understand how it's formed, or any habit. We have to understand how it's formed in the first place. And so when I was doing a bit of reading, I came across this study, that in the 1990s, a group of researchers from the Massachusetts, how funny is that? Institute of Technology basically discovered that a neurological process is at the core of everything that we do. And so basically they just were studying how habits form and how cues are directly correlated to a habit. And so they basically came to the understanding that our habits are formed on a loop. And so the loop is on a 3-point process. So we have a cue, a routine, and a reward. And so I'm going to go through a cue. So the cue would be the first start of a routine. So basically it's any trigger that tells your brain when and which habit to use. And so for example, let's say you're feeling bored. That would be the cue. The second part would be the routine. So a routine is an activity, an emotion, or a behavior. So something that you're used to doing whenever you feel a certain way. So for this instance, you're feeling bored. So let's say you're feeling bored and your routine is to grab a bottle of wine. And then the third one is your reward. So your reward is how your brain determines if the loop is beneficial to you or not. So basically how that routine makes you feel. And so in this instance, you feel bored, you grab a bottle of wine, and you feel relaxed and happy. So your mind begins to recognize that feel-good feeling based on that routine that was cued by feeling bored. So now your mind is going to associate, when I'm bored, that means I'm going to drink because that makes me happy, right? And so even though later on we likely feel crummy or we feel sick or we feel tired or whatever it is from that routine, in the moment it gave you satisfaction. And our brain can remember when we have those peaks of different hormones, those happy hormones, serotonin, whatever it is. Our brain remembers that spike of what action did we just do? Okay, we need to do that more often because that made us feel really good. And so you can begin to see just on that loop of the cue and routine and reward how quote unquote negative habits can be really easily formed, right? The cue could be, it's Friday. The routine is to go out and party with friends. The reward is to feel good and to have social time, right? And so it's about rewiring what those things are. But the things that you have to rewire is the routine, because the cue and the reward are likely going to stay the same. You're still going to have those cues of feeling bored or feeling sad or feeling angry or feeling energy or whatever it is. And the reward is always going to be the same. But we have to get down to changing what the routine is. Are you giving in to the same routines that you've always been giving into? Or is it about finding the willpower to switch that, to rewire, to create a new habit? So you can see here how it can be really, really tricky, and how substance issues can begin to form, addictions can begin to form, eating disorders can begin to form, right? Anxiety, depression, all those things can really begin to set in and become habits because we're giving into those cues and into those routines. And so it's really about beginning to examine what the routine is, because your routine is the behavior that you want to change. So it's important to ask yourself, what satisfaction are you getting from this? What benefits am I getting from this? How is this serving me? How is this pushing me towards my trajectory? How is this helping me level up, right? Or is this just something that I've been doing for so long, either caused by my own habits, and a large one is based on the habits of other people around us? What are other people's routines? Because it's really hard for us to change our routines if the people around us are still igniting in that same cue and reward. And so it does take time, and sometimes that does mean changing the people that you're surrounding yourself with, right? That's why someone coming out of recovery from addiction, if they were to go back with the same people, it's really easy to fall back into that same habit because the routine is the same. And so we really have to get down to what the behavior is and what's cueing you to go into that, and what else makes you feel the same way. What else can make you feel that same happiness? What else makes you feel elevated? What else makes you feel your best self? And the second step would be to analyze the reward. And so you can see here how we started with the routine and then the reward, and then we're going to go into the cue. Because when we're talking about habits, we almost have to go into a reverse, because the cue is likely always going to be the same, but we have to start again with the routine. And so the second one, to analyze the reward. So what is the reward? Is it short-term pleasure? Does it allow you to feel relaxed? Is it a distracting technique for you? Because once you begin to know the why of the behavior, it'll be easier for you to find a better habit that will give you the same reward. And so this was huge for me, especially with just this, recording podcasts. It's so wired in us from such a young age that weekends are a time for fun and for play and for work going aside, and we'll go back at it on Monday. And right, that's wired in us from such a young age. And so for me, it took a really long time to hone in new habits, that the weekend isn't just a time for fun and relaxation, but it's still a day to have momentum, to grow, and to put in the work. And so for me, it was forming new habits every single day of the week, not just Monday to Friday. Because if we're letting ourselves off the hook on the weekends, and it was actually Jay Shetty who had expressed on his podcast that we often feel lower vibration, lower self-esteem, lower worth on the weekends because we're not holding ourselves accountable and we're falling into old habit traps. And so the second one of analyzing your reward is just that. It's asking yourself the why of the behavior. Why are you doing this in the first place? How is this going to make you feel down the road? That is a huge question that you can ask yourself to identify if a habit is serving you or not. Why is it that I'm doing this, and what am I going to get out of this? And so the third part, identifying the cue. What compels your behavior? What kickstarts the behavior? Triggers are stealthy, so you might need to really sit down and observe your own behaviors and take notes. And that's one of the huge things that they say in the book Atomic Habits, is to just lay out from dusk till dawn everything that you're doing from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep. And this is going to be a very long list. But you'll begin to see the habits of things that you're doing every day just because you did them yesterday and the day before. But it doesn't mean that they're serving you in the best way possible. And so for identifying the cue, you can really ask yourself, what were you doing right before the unwanted act? What were you feeling? What reward were you seeking? Right? Because there's often a blank. When there's a cue, there's often something that's not being met or unfulfilled that we're trying to fill and cover up. But by being aware of the habits and what's reinforcing it is a positive way to really realize and step in and hone into change. Because we need to be able to be aware of it and to identify what the habit is in order to be able to change it. And so I know we can often think and hold on to that mindset of, this is just how I am. I'm just stuck like this. I've had these habits my whole life. We always hear people say, oh, they're just stuck in their ways, whatever it is. But the thing is that we're all stuck in our ways in some way, shapes, or form. We all have habits. We all have things that we do subconsciously without even realizing it, right? We're all the same in that regard. But we can be different in how we tend to that. We can be different in how we show up for our own habits, because we only have the control to change our own actions and our own daily things. And so again, it is about becoming mindful of, are the people you are surrounding yourself with helping you step in and change those habits? Are you becoming the best version of yourself around those people? Right? Sometimes it's about setting boundaries until you feel confident enough to not fall into your old ways. Because when we're able to set new positive habits for us that fulfill us and fulfill our life and that are in alignment, and we are able to stick to them and reinforce them in a positive way, that is one of the best forms to raise our self-love and self-confidence. Because we have the ability to change our thoughts, to catch our thoughts, to change our habits, to change our life. But it starts with becoming aware of the things that you're doing. Because we do so many things subconsciously. Even just that fact that I've said a couple times that 40% of what we do every day is a habit. Like, that's just crazy to me to think about, that almost half of our day is just already set out for us. And so how can we make sure that that 40% are things that are serving us? How can we change those routines? And I will just say that it can seem impossible sometimes in the beginning when you hear all these things. But it's really just about beginning with one or two things. One or two habits that you want to set, that you're going to set in stone for the next 2 months, 3 months, until it becomes wired in us to just naturally do. And so for me, that was creating an Excel document and making a contract to myself where I track my actions and my habits. For me, that was getting on group coaching around a community that can hold myself accountable. So maybe for your new actions and your new habits that you want to do, you set out 2 things in your journal, and every night before bed, you either check it or you say that you didn't do it. And how did that make you feel? How did that make you feel to hold yourself accountable versus not? How does that new habit elevate you and make you feel? Right? And so it's about starting small and compounding that over time. But remembering that you are the captain of your ship, right? You are the captain of your mind. And I think we forget that sometimes, because sometimes we tend to believe that we are helpless and that we are who we are. But this is so far from the truth, because you have the power to take control of the process. And now that you know and hopefully understand a little bit more that your brain is following your lead, your body is following your lead. And so it's doing what it thinks is best for you. But you can reprogram it so you can do those things to feed that into your mind. You have the power to do that and to change that. Your body and your mind is following what you're doing. The foods that you are consuming, your body is breaking that down and storing it and using it based on what you give it. And so it's the same with our habits, the people we hang out with, the things that we do, the actions that we do, even down to the small things that we don't realize sometimes. But my hope and goal of this podcast episode is for you to just become aware of the things that you're doing, potentially subconsciously, because that's where they are. They lie in our subconscious. So it's about bringing them forth, writing them on paper, getting them in front of us. And sometimes that can mean getting honest with ourselves. And it can be really hard to get honest with ourselves and see the things that we're doing, especially if it's things that maybe we feel guilt or shame about. But that's okay. That can be a personal journey with just you, your mind, and your journal. Nobody else has to know about these things right away. And it's okay if you feel those things. That means that you're feeling through your emotions. You're feeling through maybe how that's helped you get through something. Maybe it's about reaching out for mental health support or reaching out to a friend of something you're really struggling with, right? Maybe every time you reach for a substance or reach for a negative habit, it's because there's a deeper rooted pain there, right? And so it's about finding that and tending to what that deeper lying pain or thing is and getting to the root of it, because that is how we can transform and grow is by getting to the core of why those things were started in the first place. But I promise you, you have it within you to do it. Sometimes it can take a little longer. It can be being gentle with ourselves, being kind to ourselves, that we're even bringing awareness to it. Because a lot of people will go their entire life in the same habits, doing the same things. And if that's you, that's cool. But if there is even a part of you that this feels in alignment with, or that you would like to bring awareness to that to become the best version of yourself, give yourself a pat on the back for wanting to even begin that journey, because it takes work and it takes commitment. And so being proud of yourself for that. And so I just want to thank you guys so much, as always, for tuning into this week's episode, but just for bringing awareness to your own thoughts. Because if you're tuning into my podcast and you're listening to this, that means that there's a part of you that wants to become the best next version of yourself. And just knowing how rare, but also how amazing that is. Because I know what it's like for people to say things and for people to think that you're crazy for wanting to grow. But isn't that what we're all here for? Is to become the best next version of ourselves? Isn't that why we're here, is to serve others and to make the world a better place, each individually in our own ways? But it begins with ourselves, because we can't pour from an empty cup. And so I hope this allows you to just bring awareness to yourself and your life and your habits and the things that you're doing, and maybe some great habits you formed, and maybe some that you'd like to rewire, because we all have them. And it's a constant, continuous, beautiful, beautiful journey. So I want to thank you guys so much, as always, for tuning in this week for week 42 of Tiny Talks. I hope that this landed. I hope that this was in alignment. I would love to connect with you. If you listened to this and you took something away, or you're feeling pulled to share, please share this with someone you think would enjoy this type of content. Send me a message. I would love to hear your thoughts and your feedback. I absolutely love when you guys let me know that you listen and tune in, and just hearing how it resonated with you, because I think it resonates with everybody a little bit differently, which is what makes this journey so beautiful. So thank you guys all so much from the bottom of my heart. I look forward to chatting with you all next week. Bye, you guys. Thank you all so much for tuning into this week's episode of Tiny Talks. I absolutely love connecting with you all, so make sure you're following me on Instagram. I am at JessieBrown13. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to leave a review or share with someone you think would enjoy. I look forward to chatting with you all next week. And remember, get out of your head and into your heart.